to talk to.
Right, we come to questions, Church Commissioners, the House of Commons Commission and the Speaker's Committee on the Electoral Commission. We start with Michael. Can I just say to people, I'm in the middle and I'm bringing Sir Michael in, you shouldn't be walking in front, folks. Sir Michael Fabricant.
Question 1, sir.
Andrew Selous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Church Commission has provided £1 million to support music in cathedrals during the pandemic, and this sum was match funded by the Cathedral Music Trust. And the Commissioners are extremely grateful for the Trust for doing what they did to help ensure that worship in our cathedrals remains of the very highest calibre.
I thank my honourable friend for his answer. He will know that cathedral schools, like Lichfield Cathedral School, play an important part in providing young choristers for cathedrals. But they are very, very concerned that if they have to charge in the future 20% on their fees, plus possibly losing their charitable status, then they feel that they may go bust. They may no longer be viable. What assessment has the Commissioners made about the effects of such a change?
Andrew Selous.
Well, I can tell my honourable friend that there is a concern that cathedral schools may not be able to afford to pay business rates, and if the payment of business rates and the addition of VAT on fees cause choir schools to close, this would be an issue for a number of cathedrals.
We now come to Kevin Foster.
Question number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Andrew Selous.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many parish churches provide shelters and support for rough sleepers, and the Church of England is working to provide long-term secure housing for those who need it and is piloting projects to build housing on church land to enable this to happen.
Foster.
Thank my honourable friend for his answer. Church buildings and congregations can work well with local councils to reduce rough sleeping by not only providing a bed and a meal, but the opportunity for lasting spiritual and emotional support through membership of a church family. What further support can the Church of England offer parishes in Torbay undertaking such work?
Andrew Selous.
Well, I'm very grateful again to my honourable friend, and I would warmly congratulate all the churches in Torbay on the provision of the night shelter. And if I could just single out as well, in particular, Mark Gridley and Gary Mitchell, who I know have been instrumental in leading this work, and I'm sure the whole House is grateful for what they're doing. It's also typical of my honourable friend that I understand he provides a Sunday evening surgery at it. Now, I'm sure that churches across England could learn from this excellent initiative, and if any of these churches would welcome a conversation with the Church of England about housing on church land, I would ask them to get in touch with me directly, and I will enable that to happen.
James Shannon.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Church Commissioner for that response? At this time of the year, I know in my constituency, unfortunately, I've witnessed a number of people who were homeless, which we haven't seen for some time. The very story of Christmas tells you about the Lord Jesus and his journey with Mary before the baby Jesus was born, and they were homeless as well. So I'm very keen to hear from the Church Commissioner what can be done, not just here in the mainland, which I understand is a responsibility of the Church of England, but the Church of Ireland and all other churches in Northern Ireland wish to participate and be part of that as well. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for that question, and can I suggest in the first instance that he and churches in Northern Ireland might want to look at the Joint Archbishops Commission on Housing, which came out last year. It was widely praised for its work, and we are taking that work forward in the Church of England, but I'm sure churches in Northern Ireland could learn from it as well.
Patricia Gibson.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee has not had any recent discussions with the Commission on the matters raised. The Commission publishes information about donations to ensure transparency and has powers to sanction political parties which accept impermissible foreign donations. However, it has also highlighted that the political finance system is vulnerable to unlawful influence from both donations overseas and in the UK. It has recommended that parties should be required to know where donations come from and to have policies in place to manage the risk of receiving money from unlawful sources.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the Parliamentary National Security Strategy Committee revealed that the Russian state attempted to interfere with the 2019 general election. This government has made it easier for overseas donors, including those living in Russia, to donate to UK political parties. Does the Electoral Commission share my party's concerns that this government is opening up UK democracy to even greater influence by hostile nations?
It would be a matter for security services rather than the Electoral Commission to make a full assessment of whether unlawful foreign money has been used to campaign at UK general elections, for example, in 2019, as the Honourable Member points out. However, political parties must report when they are given unlawful donations and return it to the donor. In addition, the Commission carries out permissibility checks on a sample of donations and has the power to sanction political parties which accept impermissible foreign donations. The Commission will continue to recommend changes to ensure voters can have greater confidence in the political finance system.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to be able to tell my honourable friend that the Church of England has transformed its use of digital and social media in recent years, including through Instagram and TikTok, and our digital team has won over 30 prestigious awards for its work. And this has led to hugely increased online engagement, as she and I were actually learning about earlier this morning, not least amongst those who have difficulty attending church.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a multimedia age, there are 2 million people in the UK who are housebound, and globally many Christians across the persecuted church have no access to gather with others. With good Christian online content such as services and podcasts, popular series like The Chosen, through to the Alpha Course, how is the Church equipping people to safely and easily navigate to extend its mission with the equipment and skills needed to access it?
Well, can I commend the Honourable Lady on such an important question, which takes in the housebound in England and people persecuted across the world who cannot attend church safely. She's absolutely right to raise these issues. And also for those not online at all, the Church of England offers the Daily Hope, which is a free telephone line providing 24/7 worship, prayer and talks. And of course our digital content can be followed not just around England, but across the world to help make Jesus known.
Christine Jardine.
Question number 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
The committee hasn't had any recent discussions with the Electoral Commission on those matters raised. The Commission's regulatory remit is focused on ensuring that political finance is transparent and that campaigner materials include an imprint showing voters who has produced the material. The Commission doesn't have a role, however, in regulating the content of election material, but it does encourage all campaigners to undertake their role responsibly and transparently. It has called for changes in the law to improve transparency and safeguard the UK's electoral system.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for a question. And the imprints are going to be important, but we've seen already an attack on our system through cyber attacks at the last general election, and this general election we face the increased insidious threat to our democracy from AI and from fake news circulating false audio from politicians in conference time. So I wonder if there is anything else that the Commission is considering or that the Commissioner could do to attack this sort of insidious approach.
Catherine Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Commission shares the Honourable Lady's concerns about some of the threats that new technologies, deepfakes and AI-generated content could do to ultimately take away voter confidence in the electoral system. Whilst the Commission doesn't have a role in the regulation of the content of campaign material, it is working with other organisations to try and support responsible and transparent campaigning. And if the Honourable Lady would be interested, I'd be very happy to arrange an opportunity for her to meet with the Electoral Commission to perhaps discuss this further.
John Speller.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Giles Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The wine sold in the House of Commons is reviewed annually, with the next review in the spring of 2024. The Right Honourable Gentleman's question specifically relates to Australian wine. I understand there's a Chardonnay and a Shiraz available, which compares to 3 English wines. So Australian wine is represented on the wine list in the...
John Speller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as part of a dispute over COVID, China imposed particularly punishing tariffs on Australian wine with damage to their industry. So can I urge the Commons Commission to stand with our Australian friends and allies and prioritise buying Australian wine and encourage its use in our venues in order to make clear bullying doesn't pay?
Sir Charles.
In response to the right honourable gentleman, of course, if colleagues here wish to prioritise the purchase of Australian wine off the wine list, then I would encourage them to do so, but also remind them that we have very good English wines on the wine list as well. But more generally, I'm sure the nation has heard my right honourable friend's call to arms. So when we're all out in the supermarket stocking our own shelves, perhaps we should all be mindful to buy 2 or 3 bottles of Australian wine as well, seriously, to show solidarity with our Australian friends and their growers.
Bob Blackman.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Andrew Selous.
Back from wine to God, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, vandalism and theft is a persistent issue for parish churches, and I was very sorry to learn about thefts at churches in Stanmore, Hendon, Edgware and Bushy in my honourable friend's constituency. I can tell him that advice from the diocese has been circulated to all parishes in the area, and that, of course, the best way to deter thieves is to have a high footfall in and around churches, keeping the building open to welcome people, and I also know that the police will be providing crime prevention advice to the churches concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his answer. He's right that St John's Church in Stanmore was the subject of a burglary just before Christmas. Christ Church in Hendon was the subject of another burglary, and St Andrew's Church in Kingsbury was robbed during the Mass itself. So could he use his powers to encourage the police to take extra action, particularly around Christian festivals, when it does seem that there's more action being taken place by burglars as a pattern of behaviour?
Well, I think the whole House is very sorry to learn what has happened to my honourable friends' churches, and a theft during a Mass is really quite extraordinary. And I will certainly make sure that the Church of England nationally does get in touch with the Metropolitan Police in his case to pass his concerns on. And I would say, just in terms of general security advice, alarm sensors and attaching safes securely to the building will all help, making sure there's an accurate record, and pictures of valuables can also help secure their return. But we certainly don't want a repeat of what he's experienced.
Bruce.
Great, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I again commend the Prime Minister's special envoy for freedom of religion or belief on yet again bringing this issue before the House. And it's extremely concerning that the Cuban government continues to control religious activities so tightly by using surveillance, harassment, forced exile, fines and ill treatment of prisoners. And the Church of England works multilaterally through the United Nations, the World Council of Churches and other bodies to advocate vigorously for freedom of religion or belief for everyone in Cuba.
Bruce.
Thank the honourable member for that reply. Open Doors 2024 World Watch List will be launched here in the Palace of Westminster on 17th January, and I urge all colleagues to attend. I anticipate that once again it will sadly indicate a deteriorating picture of freedom for Christians around the world as autocratic regimes seek to suppress dissenting voices. With regard to Cuba, I thank the Church Commissioner for sharing my concerns on reports about the worsening situation, particularly for religious leaders there. Many subject, as he's mentioned, to harassment, fines, forced exile, detention and ill treatment in prison. And will he join me in calling for the release of religious prisoner of conscience, Pastor Lorenzo Rosales Fajardo?
Well, again, I thank my honourable friend, and she's absolutely right that the case of Pastor Lorenzo is all too indicative of a worsening climate of freedom of religion or belief in Cuba, and the Church of England calls on the Cuban government to release Pastor Lorenzo immediately, along with all those others detained in relation to the 11th of July protests. And the international community must continue to follow this case closely and hold Cuba to account bilaterally and multilaterally. She's put his name on the record in this House, and I also endorse everything she said about the Open Doors event next Wednesday in this House.
Alistair Carmichael.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Smith.
The committee discussed the matters raised at a private meeting with the Commission in November. The Electoral Commission has said that the UK Government's recent increases to spending limits and donation reporting thresholds represent significant changes to the UK's political finance controls. The Commission has published updated guidance to support parties to understand and comply with the new limits. However, it is concerned that increased spending limits risk significantly more scope for higher spending parties to campaign.
Mr Carmichael.
I thank the Honourable Lady for that answer. The Daily Mirror reported at the weekend that the Conservative Party are already spending more on the Prime Minister's Facebook page and adverts in it than Donald Trump is spending on his. So it's pretty clear already the motivation for doubling the party's spending limits. If this isn't something that can be stopped, can the Commission at least do more to increase transparency so that people can see this shoddy attempt to buy democracy for what it is?
Catherine Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Commission has said that any changes to spending or reporting thresholds should be supported by rigorous analysis, which would of course be for the Government to publish, including on the likely impact on public confidence and transparency. And the Commission continues to make cases for changes to the political finance system to further improve public trust and confidence.
Sir Desmond Swain.
10, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The House may not be aware that the Anglican Church is one of the largest providers of healthcare and education globally, and the Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza is an example of this. Before Christmas, the hospital was severely damaged again, and a tank demolished its front wall. Most of the hospital staff were taken away by the Israeli Defence Force, and the Church of England has asked the government here to inquire about the well-being and whereabouts of the hospital staff and for them to be released.
Sir Desmond.
Intimidation by hardline settlers has prompted the Patriarch to say that clergy are fighting for their lives and that the Armenian Quarter faces a violent demise. Is a Christian presence in Jerusalem still viable?
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for bringing this issue before the House, and he's right. A century ago, a quarter of Jerusalem was Christian. Now it's just 1% of the population, and he's right that in the Armenian quarter of the Old City, the Christian presence has come under intensified threat from intimidation and aggressive property acquisition by settlers. And the Church of England is very concerned that the rule of law should prevail in Israel and the existing status quo be maintained. And it is unconscionable that Christians should be driven from the Holy Land.
That completes that set of questions. It would normally come up. Mr. Simas.
I'm grateful. When I referred to December 2018, I should have made clear that was the date of the Freedom of Information request by Dorian Gerhold, and I will write to the Minister explaining what is the information I want.
Excellent. That clarifies that. We now come to business questions. I call the Shadow Leader of the House, Lucy.